Hi, friends. Happy Wednesday. This week, we've been talking about something that I think has resonated with a lot of us. You were made for more. Monday, we talked about that restlessness we sometimes feel and asked, what if the restlessness is trying to tell you something? Yesterday, we talked about how more doesn't mean doing more. More is not another commitment, another responsibility, another thing to squeeze onto an already full calendar. It's not more pressure, it's more purpose. And today I want to take that conversation somewhere that may be a little uncomfortable because sometimes the reason we're feeling restless isn't because we need to add something to our lives. Sometimes it's because we've outgrown something we're still trying desperately to fit into. But before we go there, I want to acknowledge something that I know is incredibly heavy on the hearts of so many of us, especially those of us here in East Tennessee. Yesterday, we lost our Dolly. And gosh, there are some people who become so woven into the fabric of a place that it's difficult to imagine that place without them. And Dolly was certainly that for Tennessee. Yesterday, I saw a Facebook post from someone standing beside her statue in Sevierville, and she shared four simple phrases attributed to Dolly, one of Dolly's quotes that read, "Dream more, learn more, care more, and be more." And given what we've been talking about this week, I stopped in my tracks when I read that. Because here we are talking about you were made for more, and then I see Dolly's quote, dream more, learn more, care more, be more. And I thought about Dolly's life. A little girl from the mountains of East Tennessee who dreamed beyond what her circumstances might have suggested was possible, but never seemed ashamed of where she came from. She didn't have to reject her roots in order to grow beyond them. She didn't have to become less East Tennessee in order to become more of who she was. And that is what I want us to hear today. Becoming more doesn't require becoming someone else. Sometimes it means having the courage to become more fully who you are already. And that brings me to today's conversation. Stop shrinking to fit the season you've outgrown. Oof, like anybody else already uncomfortable? I mean, because I am. Have you ever pulled something out of your closet that maybe you haven't worn in a long time? You put it on and immediately realized, okay, well, apparently things have changed. And then because we are who we are, instead of simply accepting that it doesn't fit anymore, we start negotiating with the garment. Well, maybe if I stand differently, right? Or if I hold my stomach in, or if I don't breathe, if I don't sit down. Listen, if the pants require a strategic breathing plan, the pants do not fit. And yet, isn't it interesting how often we do exactly that with our lives? We keep trying to squeeze ourselves into things we've outgrown. Roles, relationships, expectations, old definitions of success, old versions of ourselves, ways of thinking, ways of working, even dreams that once belonged to us, but don't anymore. And instead of recognizing I've grown, we assume something must be wrong with me. Maybe nothing is wrong. Maybe it just doesn't fit anymore. And I want to be really clear here. Outgrowing something does not mean it was bad. That's important. Some seasons were absolutely right for us then. Some roles served a beautiful purpose. Some relationships belonged to a particular chapter. Some dreams carried us for years. Some opportunities were exactly where God needed us. So you don't have to criticize an old season in order to acknowledge that it has ended. You can be grateful for what something gave you and still recognize that you're no longer meant to live there. I think sometimes we stay too long because we think leaving somehow means the season wasn't valuable. But that's not true. Think about the seasons of the year. We don't get angry at summer because fall comes. Well, some of us might get a little angry when summer ends, but summer didn't fail because it ended. It completed its season. And maybe there are things in our lives that were never supposed to be permanent. The problem comes when God has been growing us, stretching us, teaching us, changing us, and we keep trying to make ourselves smaller so we can remain comfortable in something that fit an earlier version of us. And when I say shrinking, shrinking can look like a lot of things. It can even sound like, who am I to do that? I'm too old. It's too late. People will think I've lost my mind. I've never done anything like that before. What if I fail? What if they don't understand? Or this one, I should just be grateful for what I have. And remember what we talked about on Monday? Gratitude and growth can exist in the same heart. You can thank God for where you've been while asking Him where He's leading you next. Ephesians 2:10, my anchor verse, for we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. God's workmanship, His masterpiece. And here's something I want you to think about. A masterpiece is not created by making every part of it look exactly the same. There are layers, there are colors, textures, there are changes. And because we're a tapestry of faith, I'm going to say it, there are threads, and some threads are prominent for a season. Others disappear underneath for a while. Some colors change, some pieces don't make sense until much later. But God sees the whole tapestry. And maybe you're looking at your life right now thinking, but this is who I've always been. Maybe. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's who you're always going to be because God is still working. You're still becoming. And I think this gets especially difficult for women because so much of our identity can become attached to the roles we've carried: mom, wife, daughter, caregiver, employee. leader, business owner, volunteer, the one everybody calls, the fixer, the dependable one, the strong one. And, sometimes God starts stirring something in us and we don't know what to do with it because we think, but everybody knows me as this. Okay, but who does God know you as? Maybe the people around you know the version of you required by your last season. And God knows the woman he's preparing for the next season. Whew. I'm going to let that sit for a second. Because sometimes becoming requires disappointing somebody's expectations of who you were supposed to remain. And that's hard. But you were not created to spend your entire life fitting inside somebody else's definition of you. Now, before anybody gets carried away, I am not telling you to quit your job today. I'm not telling you to end a relationship. I'm not telling you to move to another state. And please don't message me tonight saying, Susan, I threw away my entire wardrobe because you told me nothing fits anymore. That's not what we're doing. We're simply noticing. That's been the thread running through this whole week. Pay attention, listen, get curious, ask God. Today, I want you to ask yourself, where am I making myself smaller simply because something used to fit? Maybe it's a role, an expectation, a belief about yourself, a dream you've already outgrown. Maybe it's fear. Maybe you've been hiding a gift because using it would require people to see you differently. Maybe there's a part of you that's been whispering, there's more. And you've been answering, but this is who I've always been. What if God is saying yes and look at who you're becoming? I want to go back to those words of Dolly. Dream more, learn more, care more, be more. Notice the last one, be more. She didn't say perform more, prove more, impress more. She said be more. More fully alive, more fully present, more fully surrendered, more fully courageous, more fully the woman God created you to be. Friends, you were made for more. Not because who you are today is not enough, but because God may not be finished developing who you're becoming. And you do not have to shrink yourself to remain inside a season He may already be leading you beyond. Here's your question for today. What are you trying to fit into that simply doesn't fit anymore? Don't force an answer there. Take it to God. God, is there somewhere in my life where I'm making myself smaller because I'm afraid of what growth will require? And then, you guessed it, listen. Tomorrow, we're going to continue this conversation with, what have you been talking yourself out of? Oh, yeah, we're going there because sometimes we already know what keeps stirring. We've simply become very talented at explaining why we can't possibly do anything about it. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Until then, friends, remember, you were made for more. Not more pressure, more purpose. And perhaps one beautiful way we can honor a life that reminded so many people to dream, learn, care, and be more is to have the courage to stop shrinking from the life God created us to live. Have a beautiful rest of your day, beautiful rest of your Wednesday, friends. I'll see you tomorrow.